All right, so in this demo environment of Answer Rocket, we actually have several categories of Nielsen data. Things like pasta, rice, dried beans, couscous. And so that's what we'll be asking questions about today. Answer Rocket actually learns its vocabulary from the data we're connected to. So it knows all of the facts and attributes that go along with the categories we've got loaded in here. And what we found is that the first thing most people want to do is just understand how their category is performing. And that takes a long time. That can be lots of different data pulls and blending of data and generation of PowerPoints or presentation layers, whereas in Answer Rocket, you can use natural language and AI and machine learning to automate that whole process. So I'm going to ask a question like, give me the category overview for period 10 of 2019, right? So we're just going to ask about the rice category in October of 2019. So right now, Answer Rocket is pulling all the data required to do a category deep dive, and it's actually going to send it out and run it against an AI machine learning algorithm that's going to actually come back and give us a much more robust narrative as to how the rice category performed, as well as to what's driving change in the rice category in the background deep in the data. All right, so now that the algorithm has run, the first thing we get back here is a bunch of tabs across the top of this display. All right, so you can see things like executive summary and trend analysis and so on and so forth. Those are each different pieces of analysis that the algorithm has run in an automated fashion, things that might take a human a week or two to go off and do manually, right, the way things are done today. So the first thing we got back here is the executive summary, and this gives me kind of the headlines, the distilled insights, what's really important and going on in the category. So the first thing I see is that sales are up and rice performance is within the expected range. Down here, we're looking at performance highlights across different manufacturers and brands and markets, right? So the first thing we see is that private label is one of the main manufacturers as well as one of the main brands in the category. However, growth is being dominated by Goya Foods and Golden Star Trading from a manufacturer standpoint. And the brands that are driving that are Golden Star, Kania, and Carolina, right, contributing to 94% of the growth. Down here, we're looking at different markets. I can see very quickly that food is the main market in the rice category, which makes sense to me. Below that, we're also looking at different attributes, so looking at subcategories. White rice is the main subcategory. However, jasmine is responsible for most of the growth in the subcategories. Looking at different segments, I see that non-instant is the main segment, as well as different packaging sizes, right? Our customers dictate what actually goes into this analysis, so this is what we've chosen for our demo, and you can see that 32 ounce is the main packaging size. However, this large kind of bulk size, 320 ounce, as well as 80 ounces contributing to most of the growth. Down here, looking at key drivers of performance, I can see that base volume is the largest growth contributor in the category, and that promo unit price is the largest decline contributor. Below that, looking at the different attributes, I can see that most of the sales growth in the rice category is being driven by jasmine, non-instant, private label as a brand, right? That's 163% of the overall category growth. So very quickly, I was able to understand what's really happening and what's driving the rice category forward. From there, we can deep dive into each of the different analysis tabs. The first thing I get is kind of some trend information on the entire category. I can see things like the sales. I can see the trend. That's a non-seasonal trend. I can also see where the model that Answer Rocket has used expects all of the sales values to fall, and anything outside of that light blue shading is identified as an anomaly with that red dot there, right? And I can hover and see what those sales exactly were for period 13 of 2017. So from there, we also generate text-based insights. So if I click on the light bulb here, you can actually see in a very easy to digest format explanations about what's going on here. So I've got a nice explainer around the trend. I've got actually a forecast based on that model, right? So I can see that the next month's sales forecast for the entire category is 108 million, plus or minus a little over 3%. That was actually based on Facebook's forecasting algorithm. Answer Rocket actually uses 6 different algorithms and then chooses the best fit model based on all the calculations we've done in the background. And in this example, it chose profit, which, like I mentioned, is Facebook's forecasting algorithm. I've got growth analysis, I've got CAGR, I've got min-max average numbers being pulled out. as well as looking at different anomalies that are happening in the data, right? Explaining those different red dots that we saw. From there, we jump over to the key player analysis where we start looking at manufacturers and brands. We start segmenting them and putting them on this quadrant Pareto chart. So I can see that, hey, private label is a slow growing leader. It's got a lot of sales, it's got a lot of share, but its growth contribution index is actually fairly low. It's not growing very rapidly. These other rising stars in the manufacturer section have nowhere near as many sales or as much share in the market. However, their growth contribution index is much higher, meaning they're growing very rapidly. Right, and below that, we see that all from a brand perspective. So we have all of the same information down here, but I can look at all of the brands broken out across all the manufacturers in the space. From there, we do the same thing for the markets. There's only a handful of markets in here. It's just a product of our demo environment. Think if you had your custom data in here, you would see things maybe like retailers and understand which retailers and which stores are actually driving the category forward versus just the 3 syndicated markets I have here available in this data set. From there, we look at different product attributes. What subcategories, right, are growing and driving the category forward. I can see that, again, white is actually segmented here as a declining leader. It's got over half the market. However, its growth contribution index is negative, meaning that it's declining over time. Above that, I can see what we saw in the executive summary is that Jasmine has a lot of share, a lot of sales comparatively to the rest of the subcategories, and it's growing very rapidly as well. So something to be on the lookout for. Again, comparing non-instant to instant, as well as looking at all of the different packaging sizes. Right, I can see that my 32 ounce and 80 ounce are my stars. They comprise for almost half the market there. They're growing, not super rapidly, but they are growing as well. The rising stars down here showcase, again, the smaller packaging sizes in terms of share and sales. However, they're growing very rapidly from their growth contribution index. From there, we actually jump over to the Kpi tree. And what we've done here is kind of a full metric decomp to understand all of the metrics and how they're related and what's really driving that 1.4% sales lift in the category. So obviously what we've done here is set up sales as the primary metric, but all of those other metrics downstream in the tree are actually responsible for that 1.4% lift. And I can see what's up and down very quickly year over year just by looking at the colors. And you'll notice as you start looking at some of these different metrics that everything here on the left is your standard RMS Nielsen data, right? Things like sales and volume and units and share and things like that. But everything on the right over here is actually consumer panel data, right? So we've actually integrated 2 data sets here for this analysis, and I can see things like penetration and conversion and spend on the right-hand side. And as I scroll down, I can see what's contributing and kind of detracting from the overall 1.4% growth, and I can see things like base volume had the highest contribution to the trend, but even something like spend per household, which is a panel metric, was actually the 3rd highest contribution to that 1.4% lift, as well as everything that's detracting on the right-hand side. I can see where things are struggling in the category. From there, we actually jump over to the top stories tab where I can see all of the different attributes and combinations of attributes that are driving growth in the category. They're all listed in kind of descending order of impact. So I can see here that Jasmine non-instant had the largest impact on that lift. Most of that was driven by 80 ounce as well as private label from a branding perspective. Right, and I can scroll through and see all of those stories. And below that I can see exactly what's detracting from the category. It's Ebra Foods, it's Mahatma, it's actually private label white rice is detracting, as well as brown rice across all brands, manufacturers, packaging sizes, subcategories as well. So it's very quick for me to be able to see what's driving, what's detracting from the category, and turn around and take all of this analysis that's typically done manually over a week or two's time, boil it down into a minute or so, and I can actually leverage these insights to go drive strategy and kind of retail execution.